You can't control who you fall in love with, even if that someone turns out to be a giant destructive spider demon. Greetings, my friends! The demon-slaying adventures of Hyakkimaru and Dororo continue in another awesome episode of Dororo. Before I go any further with this review, I'm going to give a shameless plug into a video that I just worked on, my review of Dragon Ball Super Broly, the 20th Dragon Ball movie, which was absolutely insane and awesome. I worked really hard on this video, and I really want you guys to check it out. If you haven't, there will be a link for that in the description box below. Make sure to like it, share it with your friends, all that YouTube jazz. But let's go ahead and talk about this episode of Dororo, which I have to say was kind of therapeutic, especially after the last episode of the series, which was, without a shadow of a doubt, the darkest the series has actually gotten, and featured the big moment where Hyakkimaru just went on a big Wolverine rampage and fucked some samurai up. It was also the most sad episode of the series, as Hyakkimaru was finally starting to regain a lot of his humanity as well as his emotions, and right as he started to connect with someone, that person died. That person being Mio, of course. And what was so great about this episode is how it went in a complete and opposite direction. Pretty much no one died in this episode, aside from maybe a couple of workers, but that was all to serve a story purpose. This entire episode was how you just cannot judge people by their outward appearances, and if you jump the gun, it's only going to cause more damage, death, destruction, and of course heartache for lots of people. But this episode was also surprisingly simple, but what's interesting about it is that it mostly didn't even focus on Hyakkimaru and Dororo. It mostly focused on a couple of brand new characters, one of them being a really creepy spider woman who seems to be capturing people, wrapping them up in webs, and sucking up their very life force. She's essentially a spider succubus, and it's connected to this village where everybody is suddenly being kidnapped every night, and when you think about it, well, it has to be the spider lady, right? Well, actually, there's another twist in play. This is the part of the review where I put up that preemptive spoiler warning. You have been warned. Ready, set, go. Okay, so most of this episode follows this spider woman and this villager who lives in this quarry village who goes by the name of Yajiro. And Yajiro actually ends up finding this spider woman on the side of the road after she's been attacked by Hyakkimaru, and he decides to bring her home and bring her back to health. Of course, when he finds her, she doesn't look like a giant destructive monster from Inuyasha. She actually is just a very attractive Japanese woman. But interestingly, she has no name. He decides to give her the name of Ohagi because apparently that's the name of the flowers or the plants that she was actually in when he found her, and he decides that he's going to try and nurse her back to health. What he doesn't know is that she's actually a really creepy monster who sucks out the life force of people, but again, this goes with the big message of the episode, and something that I thought was actually really clever. This character, Yajiro, seems to have a soft spot for everyone. Humans, monsters, and even bugs and insects, which I think is very fitting considering that, you know, Ohagi is a giant spider woman. He displays this in a number of ways. One, there's a scene where he decides to feed her, and after doing that, there's suddenly a cockroach in her rice bowl, and instead of killing the monster and squishing it like any other person would do, he just decides to pick it up and he lets it outside. He makes the notion that all life matters and something that should be cherished. This seems to have a pretty big impact on Ohagi, but she still continues to put on this front that she's a very cold and malicious woman. Throughout the course of the episode, Hyakkimaru and Dororo are trying to find this spider chick so that they can slay her and make lots of money. And this is all connected to this other storyline where there's apparently this kidnapper going around the village and taking them out, and they suddenly disappear. It's not revealed until the very end of the episode that it's actually Yajiro who's doing this, but he's not a kidnapper at all. He's actually sneaking people out of the village because a lot of them are being forced to actually work in this quarry. It's almost as if they're actually slaves and he's trying to get them to escape, risking his very life to actually do this. It's not until later in the episode where he realizes that Ohagi desperately needs a doctor that he decides to try and sneak her out of the village, and that leads to the biggest conflict of the episode. As Yajiro and Ohagi are trying to leave the village, they're suddenly confronted by a group of super pissed off samurai, as well as Hyakkimaru and Dororo. Hyakkimaru just sees an evil demon form because all he sees is the fire of the soul, and he just sees like a lot of red fire. But he still realizes that something's not quite right about this situation. However, that doesn't stop him from immediately going on the attack, but Ohagi is able to use her spiderwebs to take these men out and even suck up some of their life force as they desperately try to escape. And that leads to what is probably the most interesting scene of the entire episode, where we learn that while Ohagi herself is a very terrifying looking spider woman, she doesn't actually kill anyone. In fact, when she actually takes their life force away, she manages to just barely leave them alive. And it makes sense. If she were to just suck dry the life force out of everyone, she wouldn't be able to survive herself. It's not until the samurai come around and they start attacking Yajiro by hitting him with some freaking arrows through the shoulder that she decides to just transform into a giant monster and wrap them all up in webs. Hyakkimaru decides to go on the attack again when he realizes that there's something not quite right about this demon. She's not killing anyone, including the person who she has easy access to right here. Without even saying it, you can tell that he realizes that this is not your everyday normal demon. And it makes sense, we've seen a couple like that in the series thus far. You can't judge a book by its cover, even if that cover is a giant freaky spider chick. And I'm not kidding, her like full spider form is absolutely terrifying. Like the close-up of her face with her giant mouth opening up, filled with all of these razor-sharp black teeth, that shit's gonna haunt your memories forever. And even after seeing that, Yajiro isn't afraid either. He's still very much in love with this woman and is willing to give up his entire life and even wanting to leave with her, which eventually he does, and I imagine they have a very happy ending and have many creepy spider children together. It's a really important message showing that you really can't help who you fall in love with. When you fall in love, you fall in love. And so the episode actually does kind of have a happy ending, with Ohagi and Yajiro escaping from the village and Hyakkimaru and Dororo continuing their journey. What's really great about the final scene of the episode is when Dororo actually has this spider fall on top of him, which freaks him out and bites him, and right as he's about to kill it, he decides that no, that's not the best course of action. In fact, it's probably his fault for scaring the spider in the first place, and he allows it to go. This is when Hyakkimaru actually laughs for the very first time in the series, and it's a really great moment considering how everything just went south in the last episode, where everything was so extreme and violent. Here, everything was a lot more peaceful, and everything was handled with a lot of tact. It is a little jarring that in the span of a single episode the characters have grown so much, but considering what they've actually been through, it actually does kind of work for the series and feels kind of cathartic after seeing all of that carnage from the last episode. So what's the rundown on this episode of Dororo? A very nice episode, which like I said is a great companion piece to the last episode, as it is just so incredibly different from that. It was also a very bold decision to focus on a couple of brand new characters, especially because I really wanted to see how the last episode was going to have an effect on Hyakkimaru. The fact that he can't really display a lot of personality yet is probably why I'm okay with this, as it would seem kind of strange for him to suddenly just change like this in the span of an episode, when we know that eventually he is going to have to fight some more demons in order to get back his senses and his other body parts. But this episode served as a great juxtaposition to all of the violence from the last episode. I will say though, I was almost fully convinced that when the samurai appeared at the end of the episode to confront Ohagi, that Hyakkimaru was just going to end up killing them too, but it ended up going in a completely different situation. This was an interesting episode to say the least, and it's really great that in the span of just a couple of minutes, they actually managed to make me care about each of these characters, Yajiro and Ohagi, especially Yajiro, who at first just seemed kind of like a very standard stock character, who I was almost fully convinced was going to be killed by this succubus spider. But no, they actually ended up forming a very strong relationship, and like I said, I thought it was very fitting that he seemed to have a soft spot for bugs and insects, and of course he ends up falling in love with a spider woman. If I only had one detriment to this episode, it would probably be that it wasn't the best looking episode of the series. While for the most part Dororo is a really great looking anime, there are moments where you can tell that they are cutting corners on the animation and maybe even some of the artwork. But for the most part, this wasn't like a big flashbang awesome action episode. episode, there were little moments of that, but ultimately this episode was more tied to the overall message, and I think it really came through in the story of Yajiro and Ohagi. It was a beautiful moment, and I hope to see more like that in the series as it goes on. What started as a Monster of the Week style story ended up turning into something a little more heartfelt, and it ended up being a very powerful message, which is why I'm going to give the episode a 4 out of 5. I really liked the episode. Like I said, some of the production value was a little down in some moments, but overall it was a big accomplishment for them to introduce brand new characters and get rid of them in the span of 20 minutes and still make them leave a big impact, not only on me, but actually on the characters of Hyakkimaru and Dororo. Big growing moments for these characters and a great juxtaposition to the last episode. Really loved this one right here. If any of you guys did watch the episode, I'd love to get your thoughts about it. You can tell me all of them in the comments section below. What did you think about the story of Yajiro and Ohagi, and what do you hope to see from the rest of Dororo? Thank you all for watching this review. As I said at the very beginning, make sure to check out my Dragon Ball Super Broly review, and I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down, baby.